We are broadcasting live.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. This is the town of November 16th, 2021. This meeting is being conducted by means of electronic participation as permitted by Section 238, subsection 3.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, and the Town of Mono Procedural Bylaw 2020-24. Council chambers are currently not open to the public. This meeting is being broadcast live and can be reviewed on our website. I see that we have a quorum, and pecuniary interest can be declared at any point during the course of the meeting, followed up in writing to the clerk. I'd like to call on Councillor Davey to read the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Mono resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Tionantati, the Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. We also acknowledge that the town of Mono resides within the treaty lands named under Treaty 18, the Nottawasaga Purchase of 1818. These traditional territories upon which we live and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources.
Thank you. I should just note before I ask for a mover and seconder to approval of the agenda that this is a special meeting of council called as a result of our not being able to go live on YouTube last Tuesday. There have been a couple of changes to the agenda, namely an in-camera session that will commence at the top of the agenda. And then we will go back into a public session after that. So I have a motion that council approves the agenda of session 2021 as circulated. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Mankdalo and Councillor Davey. Any objections to approval of the agenda? I should also indicate, are there any things in Schedule A that you want to bring forward under new business? Councillor Mankdalo?
I have two things. First, I'd like to request that my report, which is number 4 of Schedule A, be brought up to Roman numeral 7, which is bylaws, correspondence, and business additions. That would be a part of that portion of the agenda.
Thank you. Any other items, Councillor Martin?
I'd like to have a bit of a discussion about the Maple Inn, or whatever we call it these days. Also, I'm interested in the roof at the Recreation Center in Shelburne. So that's number 5. And I'd like a little bit of clarification on number 9.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Mankdalo?
I'd also like to discuss number 6, the NVCA board highlights.
Okay. So I have if there's no other matters to be brought forward, I have a motion. Any opposed to the motion that we approve the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next matter is a motion to move into a closed meeting pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended at 9:05 a.m.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yes.
Just before we do that, would it be possible to just pass the minutes of the previous meeting and then go in camera, or do you want to come back to that?
I had this discussion with Mark earlier, and I think we'll do the minutes after we come out of in camera.
Okay.
Thanks. I hadn't forgotten them. And the in-camera session is for matters of advice that are subject to solicitor-client privilege by law enforcement update. And that is under section 239, subsection 2, subsection F. Any opposed? Oh, do I have a mover to that motion? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Davey. Anyone opposed to going in camera? Thank you. And we'll go in camera and rise and report shortly. Thank you.
We are back live.
Thank you. And I have a motion that we rise from an in-camera session at 9:48 a.m. and the council accept the advice from the town solicitor and direct staff and the town solicitor to proceed accordingly. Do I have a mover to that? Deputy Mayor Nix, and seconded by Councillor Martin. Any opposed? And that motion is carried. Back to the regular agenda. I have a motion that council approves the minutes of session 23, 2021 is circulated. Do I have a mover? Councillor Maxwell. And seconder? Councillor Davey. Any opposed? And that motion is carried. We have no proclamations today. Public question period. Fred, do we have any submitted questions?
Yeah, we have a number of questions submitted in advance. So I'll start with the first. This is from Bob McCrae. And he asks, given that almost all public venues, churches, sports arenas, restaurants, retail stores, supermarkets, libraries, etc., have now opened up to full or almost full in-person capacity, when does the town of Mono plan on restarting in-person council meetings? He goes on to say that if proper double vaccination screening is done, like in many public venues, then there should be no risk to council members, staff, or the public. The meeting should still be broadcast so members of the public who do not want to get vaccinated can participate. It's the new way to do things, and we might as well get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Mar, do you have any thoughts on this? And I know that the county is looking at creating a hybrid matter where a number of councillors could be off-site while a number of councillors present for a meeting. And how soon do you realistically think that we could go back to normal?
Well, I think technologically, I think Fred had indicated to me that they're looking at doing a test of the system tomorrow. I stand to be corrected, Fred, it was sometime this week. So I know when Orangeville first tried to do the hybrid type meeting, they had all sorts of issues regarding echo with multiple people in a single room, such as the council chamber. So there is that matter. So I know Fred was talking about that. I guess one of the other matters is council has not directed staff to turn our building into a double vax facility or a fully vaccinated facility. So that's another issue for council to consider. And then it's just how many people, how many councillors do you feel should be in a room? And how many public should be in a room? If you recall, we did run the OMB hearing last September, October, and we had a maximum of 18 in the room at that time. That was with the chairs spread out 6 feet. So that was kind of our limits at that time. So there are a lot of issues to consider, not just the fact that restaurants can go to 100% capacity. So time-wise, I think we'd be seeking some direction from council, whether that's something you want to do. I guess the other thing is you're starting to see countries in Europe lock it down again, and our numbers are increasing again. So that would be the caution I'd have.
Any thoughts, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with respect to Bob's request, I understand it, but I've been watching the curve, the number of cases after the fourth wave, and it's tilting back up in Ontario, which is of some concern. And I would also add that these, not Zoom meetings or whatever this technology we're using, I think with the exception of last week, you know, they work very well. People can see it, people can submit questions. And it would be some effort on the part of staff to open up the council chambers and, you know, check the double vaccinations, check the names for tracing purposes. It could be a lot of work. I think we should play quite cautiously and wait until we're absolutely sure this pandemic has died down.
Sharon?
With all due respect, Deputy Nix, if you're waiting for that to happen, we'll never be back in that chamber, because this is for real. This is an airborne disease that's going to be here forever now. So we'll never be back in there. And I don't understand why we can't be in that chamber. We can be separated out quite well. And we, as you've said, the council is double vaxxed. Some of us are even triple vaxxed. I plan on not taking that mask off, maybe for the rest of my life. But I really think that being in the same room makes a difference. We don't have to have a gallery. They can be a gallery on the on our go-to-meeting venue, whatever can work that way. But I'd really like to see us working towards being in person for our meetings. And the other thing is the air quality is the most important thing. You can wipe the surfaces till you're blue in the face and we might not get a cold, but the air quality is uppermost. And as I think I heard that maybe HEPA filters are involved now. I'd have to ask Mark about that, but I would really like us to see us start moving towards being in person. For sure.
Councillor Mankalo?
Mark and I have talked about the filtration system and circulation, and I think it was under study, if I remember correctly, Mark. So I have a comment as well, but the question first is, could you update us on what the current status of the council chamber and the rest of the offices are with respect to the circulation, adequacy of circulation, and the presence of HEPA filters?
Sure, we've placed where the public is in the office, we have placed temporary or portable HEPA filters. The main facility and the council chambers does not have a HEPA filter, but when the facility was reconstructed, there was an air exchanger. So again, there is no HEPA filter, but there is an air exchanger, but that's only functioning when it's circulating in the council chambers. As council's aware, sometimes very hot, very cold, and that gets turned off. The other matter which I neglected to let council know is if you were all participating in a council meeting in those chambers at the council desk, we would also have to provide some form of barricade between you in the form of like plastic dividers, just because you would be in such close proximity at the council desk with your microphones.
Oh, if I can continue, Your Honor, to some extent, the regulations are lag behind the science, if you like. And Sharon's quite right. Surface contacts is very rarely, if ever, a cause for transmission. And standing 6 feet from someone else is also probably fairly irrelevant. What it seems to be most relevant is the floating particles that may float in the air for a significant period of time, sometimes for hours, and that they build up in time in concentration, depending on the air exchange and the filtration. So I think that's where we need our function. I recognize that the plastic is a part of our regulations, these dividers, but they probably don't make any difference. So Mark, with respect to the HEPA filters, has there been some thought about getting an installation of these?
Not at this time, Councillor Mankalo. We're aware of this request to council. We're waiting to see what decision council was looking at. We can certainly take that further and see what costs are involved.
Councillor Davey?
It would be my
Any thoughts? Oh, sorry, Ralph, go ahead.
It would be my recommendation that, that this is a direction to proceed. I think that, both I agree with both Fred and Sharon with respect to their comments about the pandemic or it becoming an endemic. We have one new case per in Mono, and one new case in Orangeville. So it's very, very low here. We recognize that Eastern Europe is having a problem, probably because of low vaccination rates and more virulent bugs such as the Delta. It's possible we may go through another wave or not yet. So I'm kind of inclined. I actually, to be transparent, I spoke to Mark to see what his thoughts were on this last month, because I think it's something that it is useful to be together. It has some value to it, more than we have with these remote meetings, in my opinion. But we may go through another wave. I don't know. We certainly are going to get to a stage where this is just another coronavirus, and we'll learn to live with it. We're presently at 86% total double vaccination rate in the Wellington Dufferin County, so it's pretty good here.
Councillor Davey, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think it's a bit premature to move in. I think that the technology, and it's nice to know that you're going to test it this week. But I think that, when the system is working well and everybody can communicate, the public can pose their questions, and I don't know what the hurry. I'm not on board with it being a hurry. There's a lot of benefits to the Zoom. We were able, or not Zoom, but the GoTo meeting. We were able last week, when there was a glitch, to solve the glitch right away, with respect to saying, let's stop it and come back in a week. And I don't know that really created a problem. So I think of course we're headed back towards being in person, but I don't know that we're there yet. I think that, yes, the places around the world that are increasing in their numbers right now in a worrisome way are less vaccinated, but ours are increasing too, and we are more vaccinated. So I think it just might be a bit premature.
If I can weigh in, I think being cautious and having a plan to return to something closer to normalcy are not mutually exclusive. I think we can develop a plan, but the timing of its implementation is contingent on what circumstances we find ourselves in. Where I have an issue is not giving staff the green light to develop the plan, for fear that things may get worse. I think we can do both. Again, not mutually exclusive. Sharon, and then I think we should move on to making a decision or going to the next question.
Really nothing, but I agree with you that we can do both things. We can look into being all back together and make sure that we are complying with all the sometimes ridiculous plans that they have for us during COVID. But I think we can do both.
Melinda?
And just like, for example, the fact that we had an in-camera today, and I suppose that would be a hybrid thing, but we were able to get our council to come on short notice and so on. And I guess that would be the hybrid part. I would hate to see us just want to move to being in person, because that's what we used to do, and drop some of these added technological advances that we've got. And I don't know how much money it's going to cost to get all the filters and do what machinery needs to happen and so on. It might at the moment be extremely expensive.
So Mark, is this something that you can work on in anticipation that when the time is right, we can go to a different model? I think, we were doing YouTube prior to COVID. We'll be doing YouTube after COVID. The issue is whether we can do both in live in chambers and YouTube with some degree of safety. And I think it's an issue that needs to be worked on, and we need to be prepared.
Yes, I think that's it's totally doable. We've been thinking about it for probably a year now. I think we purchased the technology for the council chambers to go hybrid probably, I would say, 8 months to a year ago in anticipation of this. The air quality issue is something I can have investigated. There will be some financing required for that, and we can work with our heating contractor on that. So, or HVAC people with that. So we can bring. I'd suggest we probably will be bringing reports back to you in stages as to how we need to open up. I guess the other component is, a policy regarding the facilities on the public coming in being double vaccinated as well. You don't have that, so that's another consideration. So there's a lot of different components that are going to come together here, but we can certainly move towards a process to be opened up. Some municipalities have started. They're in a different circumstance where they're either kind of going to full-on meetings as opposed to a hybrid type meeting, and others have gone to basically putting council members in cubicles in the council chambers and reducing the number of people there. So there are options, and some of them are better than others. So we'll work towards bringing reports back probably within the next month, Your Worship.
Sharon, very briefly, we need to move on.
Yeah, very briefly. Regardless of when and how soon we get back into the council chambers, I think air quality should be top of mind anyway. So that's my 2 cents worth for that. Thanks.
Okay. If it's agreeable, then can we move to the next question?
Okay, so next we have, we've got 3 questions, all from the same person. I'm just going to go through one at a time. So the first question is for Mr. Hussein. He's looking for an update on the diversity and inclusion recommendations within Mono. Where are we with planning stages? These were questions that he asked in May and in September. In addition to this,
I think I can speak to the first one. Mark and I have talked about the possibility of some training, both for Mono staff as well as council, and I think he had some thoughts along the lines of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendation with regard to training on Indigenous matters, and I suggested to him that we add the diversity piece to this, and also approach other municipalities within Dufferin to see whether or not we can do things in tandem with them. Does anyone have any other thoughts on this? And I'd like to commend our roads people for being very, very fast to respond to the defacement of signage on our roads, and they did so on a very timely basis. Anything further? So the second question has to do with Fred, if you can introduce us to the second.
So again, following up from questions he posed in May and September, Mr. Hussein's looking for an update on the black cat that the town bought and whether it's going to be installed at any time on the Mono-Agila town line. He also is asking for justification with respect to paving. Again, this would be on town line from 89 to Hockley Road.
Yeah, I can speak certainly to the black cat. That was the device that was purchased for the use of the OPP. At their discretion, I have no doubt that it will be deployed on the town line as well as in other problem areas within the town. We have a police service board meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure that we'll have further discussion about black cat deployment and the results that we're getting from it. As for paving, I think that's a budget issue, and I know that Mike is alive to the requests by various residents for paving, or in many instances, not paving sections of road within Mono. Any thoughts, Council? Okay, Fred?
Well, I mean, Mike's online. Mike, if you want to speak, I am going on memory. I don't think there are any plans for putting asphalt on the town line, but it isn't just a budget question, Your Worship. We look at traffic volumes. Once they exceed approximately 500 vehicles a day, then it's justified to put asphalt down. And I don't believe the town line, I haven't looked in quite a while, Mike, but I don't believe the town line reaches those traffic volumes.
You're correct, Councillor Nick, or Deputy Mayor Nix. Definitely it's not on Public Works radar with respect to paving of that road. There was some discussions when the mayor from Agila had lost his name now, it'd be 10 years ago. He asked, and I did provide council back in 2010 with a report, and I think the results were somewhere in the $3.8 to $4.5 million range for that section. But I could redraw that and perhaps send it to the resident. But those prices would be out of date, obviously. And like you've said, it hasn't really met our thresholds that we've set inside of the draft roads needs study that I prepared in 2012.
Any further discussion on this question? Seeing none, Fred, final question for Mr. Hussein.
So his final question is asking how the town will be promoting the holiday season, and he suggests if it might be something similar to what the town did at Halloween.
Okay. Kim, are you with us?
I sure am. In the past, we haven't ever sent any, we've never done anything like this. The most we've done to promote Christmas is our Winterfest. And the reason why the Halloween bags was because in lieu of the Halloween party that we always had for the children, the focus of the bags was, we'll bring the party to you since you can't come to us. So that was the reason for the Halloween treat bags. We by all means can do Christmas, I guess it'd be Christmas stockings or whatever, and do something. We do have a little budget that could be taken from the Winterfest budget, but other than that, there really is no budget. The budget for the Halloween treat bags came from the Halloween party budget. So if council would like me to go ahead and do something like this, by all means, recreation staff will certainly put something together.
Any thoughts? Melinda?
I guess I know that we've jumped to Christmas, but his comment was about holiday season, and given that our first question with respect to diversity and inclusion, it might be kind of tricky to, which holiday. There's a lot of holidays going on in the beginning of the winter. How do we celebrate them all? as opposed to waiting until all of your personal family holiday time and vacations are over, and then having our Winterfest, which is a completely inclusive. This is the season. We're in the middle of all this snow. How can we all have some fun together? I think is a better use of our budget than sending around some candy to some kids who I don't know all of the things that everybody does for their different holidays, but I know eating is a features prominently in most of them, and so they're not really good. The kids aren't going to be lacking that. That would be my thought, that to focus on the let's get that Winterfest back up.
Here. Ralph?
I couldn't have said it any better, Melinda.
Thank you.
All agree? Very good. Okay. Any further questions? Oh, Mark?
Sorry, just to follow up on that discussion. I'm taking it from that council would like us to work towards Winterfest in January, because there are some problems with that would have to be overcome and looked at. So if that's the direction, I'm seeking it now so Kim has time to put together a plan. We're going to have issues with the public in the building. If you're talking about doing something entirely outside, probably without food, that's something that may be doable. But there are issues with an event like that. But again, it's not something that can't be overcome, but it may be, there will have to be compromises in place. It's not going to be the same old Winterfest, but it can be a Winterfest.
Any thoughts, Sharon?
I think Winterfest is something that we need, and that is how in Mono we have celebrated Christmas or whatever. And yeah, I'd really like to see that go forward. But since there isn't much else on, there is no reason why it couldn't be pushed to February as well. I mean, if that helps to have a longer lead in, to be able to figure out how to do some things, and you know, then that maybe it could be in February instead of in January, to move it further away from us right now. And as far as food goes, there are food trucks. You can always haul in a food truck. They're doing it anyway. Thank you.
So is it the will of council to explore a Winterfest appropriately modified for safety purposes, potentially in February, to give us more time for planning? Ralph?
You know, I kind of like the idea. I recognize the issues that Mark's brought up, and they're quite significant. If we have bad weather, it's a it's a blow by. Maybe we need to plan on a big tent or something like that. I mean, Kim, I'd be interested in Kim putting her inventive cap on and seeing if she can't come up with something that could fit the weather and fit the people. It's sure going to be different if you have to be outside all that time. And yet, I think, you know, it's one of the things that we've done here, and I think we've done it very well. And it's been a good thing that's helped to keep the community together. So I'd be interested in suggesting to Kim that she look into what type of program could be put on, given that the restrictions we assume are likely still going to be outside. It may change by then. We may be letting everybody who's doubly vaccinated enter or something like that. Maybe we'll go to the Austrian process.
Okay. Kim, do you have enough guidance to proceed with some thoughts and planning?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one of the things I will heads up council is one of the fundraisers that really were significant in helping to subsidize Winterfest was the raffle, the snowflake raffle, and our food counter. So without those two fundraisers, we basically cut our budget for Winterfest in half.
Okay. Melinda?
Right, which this year might actually be okay, right? We don't have to necessarily have all of the events, but and it doesn't have to be all day either. We could just something to, because have we had 2 winters, or have we only had 1 winter that it hasn't been? Right, because the first thing COVID came in March. At any rate, something smaller to work within the budget of not selling the food and having the raffle could still be really fun. And then again, we don't want to go too late in February either, because the weather is iffy with the climate change, right? So something, end of January, beginning of February, where it's going to be cold, but.
Well, I'm thinking right away something maybe to combine Valentine's, because we had our Valentine Euchre event that has been canceled and was such a people enjoyed so much. So now all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, if council is good with going into February, I can combine Valentine's and Winterfest together and turn it into some type of event in that respect.
Okay. Anything further on that? Seeing no takers. And assuming, is that our last question?
Yeah, that was our last question submitted online, and I see nobody logged in looking to ask questions. So that wraps up CUPE.
Very good then. On to unfinished business and deferred items. We have our usual list of unfinished council business. Does anyone have any comments on that list? I know that we're going to address one of the matters on that list as the next item on the agenda. So that will be one fewer things. Ralph?
Yes, Your Honor. I just like to comment on the fill bylaw, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. I know there have been problems with this. We're not dependent entirely on our own staff. In fact, significantly not dependent on them. But the estimated date for this has changed quite a few times, and now it's at January the 25th. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to have it there. That we'll be able to deal with it at that time. The fill bylaw, it would be nice to have it in place because people are going to be looking at bringing in fill, and they'd like to know what the new rules are. And at the moment, we're sort of a bit in limbo. So it's just a request that we do have that, and I recognize that that's not entirely in Mark's control. Thank you.
Mark?
Your Worship, I'd made a note earlier in my council notes here to bring an interim memo to council on fill. So that's not an issue. I'll put some thoughts out there for you as how you want to proceed.
Okay. Next item for discussion is the joint water management agreement, which we now have. And thanks to everyone who has made that possible. And I have a motion which I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, and then we can have a discussion about the wording and terms of that agreement. And the motion reads as follows: that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw authorizing the town of Mono to enter into a joint water supply management model agreement with the townships of Amaranth and East Gary, Garifraxa, and the town of Orangeville, substantially in the form as attached as Schedule A to the bylaw, and that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that motion? Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Martin. Discussion. Fred.
Yeah, just to give the background here, this goes back to the Clean Water Act and the identification of threats to our drinking water systems. And we had a water quantity threat here in the Orangeville, Mono, Orangeville, East Gary, Amaranth area back in about 2017. Chaired by the county and funded by the provincial grant. We hired a consultant, and he basically wrote us a report on how we could manage this water quantity threat. The threat in Mono only affects our Cardinal Woods wells. It doesn't affect our Island Lake wells. Once the province approved our plan, our source water protection plan, we were to have implemented the details of the plan by 2018. So as you can see, we're a little late. In about April of this year, I think it was April, we did get a draft agreement given to us by someone from Credit Valley Conservation. Mark and I spent quite a bit of time on that draft and basically did a lot of work to sort of say we needed some changes. For some reason, it took quite a bit of time, and it was only within the last, month, the 4 municipalities met under the chair of Chris Garrett's from Amaranth, and we went through the changes. Mono had suggested some very good comments from the town of Orangeville, and taking all that together, Chris prepared what's before you today. Mark and I went through it in some detail, and to be honest, I have some little, troubles with some of the words and some little minor things with it, but the substance of it is fine. But then, as Mark suggested, the thing is, there's 4 municipalities looking at this. If I wanted to change one word, the procedures to get this to go around are complicated. So, as Mark suggested, we should just pass it in essence and let the 4 CAOs of the municipalities do any finalizing to it. The agreement essentially says this. It says, look, we've got to meet every so often. The 4 municipalities have to meet every so often and look at 2 things. One, has the rolling average of water taking over the last 4 years increased by more than 5% from the affected wells? I'm going on memory. There's about 14 wells. Mono has, I guess, 3. There's the Pullen well over in Amaranth, and then I think 9 of the 10 wells in Orangeville are in the Guelph-Amabel aquifer. So every so often we have to meet, we have to look at whether the water taking has increased over the last 4 years, and we have to look at the number of hectares of developed or redeveloped land has increased. If either of those, and Ralph, you had raised the issue, why 5%? We raised that in our telephone meeting with the 4 other municipalities, and to be honest, it's an arbitrary number. But there was no uptake from anyone else to sort of say, we should get a consultant and revisit that. So it was more or less just dead silence. So we haven't pushed it. It is an arbitrary number. It was suggested to us by the consultant. So if either water taking or developed land increases by more than 5% every time the 4 municipalities meet, the normal practice will be to rerun this model. We don't know the cost of that. The consultant ballpark maybe $100,000, and the rest of the agreement really deals with how we divvy up those costs. So in principle, never mind a few little words that I'm maybe not happy with, but in principle, the agreement's fine, and I think we should pass it, Your Worship.
Any further comments or questions? Ralph?
Yes, I'm in favor of this process. There's one rather critical part of it, and that is whether, on what basis is the decision to proceed with running the model again. And that's listed under model update frequency, triggers, and conditions, number 3. And I find the wording of that a little bit hard to understand. So I request that when it's looked at again, it's fine-tuned, that you look at the decision to proceed or the decision to defer, because that seems to me to be that they're incompatible.
Sure.
I would agree, Your Worship. I had some problems with that. I think, going on memory, Ralph, it says the practice will normally be to rerun the model, and I have no idea what that means. But in any case, as Mark and I discussed it, the idea is let's get it passed today. Hope the other 3 municipalities pass it, and they can do some final cleaning up of the language.
Agreed.
Sharon?
My comments are, I'm really happy that the agreement is finally in its final, the way it's going to be, and I'm happy with letting the CAOs figure these things out, any wording. I'm just wondering how, this is the kind of report that never gets to our residents at all. They don't understand, I'm going to use the they, don't understand that there has been a water threat. They don't understand that perhaps we should be going back to probably the 70s when we talked about protecting our water and protecting our water systems and using things in our homes that showed we did know and we did care about water systems. I don't know how we do something like that, but I would really like to see something like that happen, that the public, our public, Mono, understands that there are ways to save water and there's a reason for doing it and all of those things. Just like in the olden days, when I first brought up blue boxes in the 70s, it was, I was told many things, mostly to go away. But I think we need to start having people pay attention to the water they're using, whether they're on a well or whether they're on one of our fabulous water systems. Thank you.
Any further comments? I agree with you, Councillor Martin. This is the first year in my memory where our pond level was down and the flow into that pond was less than it historically has been. And anyone looking at Island Lake will know that we have experienced water issues as recently as this last summer. So I would hope that in any future redesign of our website, which is a project I'd like to get going on at some point fairly soon, we have something educational about water and the necessity of cherishing it, because quite frankly, a lot of people think that because we live at the headwaters of 4 river systems that we have an abundance of it, when in reality we're challenged. Okay, I have that motion, and any opposed to the motion as read? That motion is carried. Under bylaws, correspondence, new business, and additions to the agenda, item number 1 is the suggested council meeting schedule for 2022. Any comments on that schedule? Fred? Fred Simpson?
Yeah. Did you want to cover off the cost of living? I separate out the budget intentionally to make it easier for the public to follow.
Yeah, fair enough. I jumped the gun there. Next item is the cost of living allowance, COLA. The suggestion for planning purposes by the treasurer, and I'm assuming Les is back with us.
Yes.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead, Les.
Okay. Well, this is the first step in the budget process. Council decides on the figure for inflation. It's a process that's been in place. I'm thinking, well, as long as Deputy Mayor Nix has been on, I think it was his original idea to do an average of inflation rates. Past councils, when I first was with Mono, we would pick the going rate of the day. So today's going rate of the day is 4.4% for Ontario. But Mr. Nix suggested something a little bit more even-keeled, a little bit more fair, and then we started doing the average of inflation rates for Ontario for the same 1-year period. The average is 2.4%, and basically it's inflation for Ontario from last October to this September, because the October rate that was just published actually is for September, is for the month before. So basically, it's not carved in stone. It's a guide for council to help staff prepare the budget.
Fred?
Yeah, and just to explain something here, this calculation of the average increase in the CPI is identical to the methodology used by the Canada Pension Plan or any other of the major pension plans. That's the way they calculate their COLA clauses or their increases in pension benefits. And I know the mayor is concerned about something. By agreeing to this number, we're not setting wage levels next year. We're not setting budget next year. All we're sort of saying is, this is the number, okay? Now, we can deal with it when we get to budget time, but that's the number. I should also add, Your Worship, that we've had one resident email us several times suggesting our calculations are slightly incorrect. Les and I have checked and double checked the numbers. And I thought when this resident emailed us, because he sent us a chart, which appears to be from Statistics Canada, and of the 12 months that's shown on Les's report, he had one number that was different. And I thought, well, maybe Stats Can has revised their estimate for that month. I have searched and searched and searched, and I can find no revisions. So Les and I are standing by the numbers that are in front of you.
Any questions or comments from council? So Les, I think you have the go-ahead to base your planning assumptions on the figure that has been presented, mindful of the fact that when we get into budget, anything is possible.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now, back to the item I called earlier, the 2022 council meeting schedule. Fred Simpson.
So of course, next year will be a little bit different in that it's an election year, and I've made notes in my report as to why I've recommended the dates come November and December of next year. Otherwise, this is pretty much as council has done the last couple of terms. The only thing I would point out is that in January, there is the Roma virtual conference. I'm not aware that that anyone from council attended it last year. When it was an in-person conference, we used to adjust the January meeting, the second meeting in January, to ensure it worked around Roma. I haven't done that with this, so that's something council may wish to consider.
Any comments on the dates as suggested? As everyone knows, I'm in favor of meeting every 2 weeks, but I'm not going to interject into this, but reserve the right to call a special meeting if we have a logjam of items to deal with as a result of a 3-week hiatus. Okay. Next item is a report on the parking enforcement revenue and costs. Fred, would you like to take us through this?
Okay. Now, does council want me to go through the report in detail or just let council ask any questions at this point?
Just questions, I think.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions about the figures contained in the report? Mindful of startup costs and the paid duty, which may not come into play in the future. I think that it's food for thought. Ralph?
Thanks for bringing this all together, Fred. And also, I want you to know that the amount of work that you put into this personally off regular hours last spring and summer was very much appreciated. And you jumped in when we had a crisis, and I think handled it very well. Thank you. My comments about there's a lot of numbers here, and I went through it a couple of times and trying to follow it all. And I guess I'm not really convinced of the conclusion. I think that we will not be, in fact, I think we could break even, actually. We were kind of overdid it a little bit. At one time there, we had 3 bylaw officers, OPPs, and park wardens all giving out tickets. And I noticed that, for example, in the month of June, I think there were 46 tickets given out on over 5 days or 4 days, which is eight days actually. So there were not many tickets being given out at that time. So my suspicion is that we can handle it without as many people, probably as Fred has suggested, without the OPP, and probably with only one additional bylaw officer during this time. And that would be basically a 6-month thing. In addition, the revenues are going to be higher. The $90 didn't kick in until sometime in August, when over 3/4 of our revenues had come in already. So I'm not as, shall we say, I wouldn't say this is a pessimistic report, but I'm not as pessimistic about it being that much of a cost, incurring cost. Although I don't think that's a bad thing. If it does incur cost, fine. We need to do the job that we need to do. But I suspect that our revenues and costs can be closer to being the same thing.
Fred?
Yeah, Fred Simpson, it's an excellent report, and thanks for all the effort you put into it. You end with your conclusions, which seem to me are basically looking for a bit of advice from council. I would be in favor of continuing the effort next year. And then I just want to question you on, you seem to suggest or hint that we may need another part-time position. I don't know if, are you asking us for an opinion on that right now? Or is it when Les prepares the budget, or are we going to put some allowance for that in there? And one of the reasons I asked that, I think, and I could be wrong here, that we have another director who may need a bit more staff help than he's getting right now. So I mean, you know, the truth is, the town's growing up. Maybe we have to make an allowance for another employee in next year's budget. I'm not advocating that right now. I want to go back to you though, Fred Simpson. You sort of seem to be saying, if council wants this level of effort to continue next year, we need another part-time person. Am I correct in interpreting your conclusions that way?
Yeah, it's we were able to administer the parking tickets this year because we had a staff person who wasn't handling recreation bookings. So if we're going to be handling recreation bookings next year, then we no longer have that resource available. So somehow it has to be made up. How that's done, that I'll leave for Mark to and Les.
Mark?
Yeah, I think, Fred, your deputy mayor next year, your comments were bang on. We wanted to bring this forward so that you are aware. We will budget accordingly in the budget. We'll put that forward in the budget as a recommendation, I would think. Those are discussions you're going to have in totality with the budget and other staffing concerns.
Any other questions or comments? Sharon?
I also would like to thank Fred Simpson for all the work that he put into this, as well as writing this very in-depth report. And to me, when I saw the numbers, I was a little bit shocked. However, wherever it ends up, this is the cost of doing business in Mono now. We had to protect the people who live around that beautiful park, and we had to at least somehow make the people who are visitors be a little more respectful of the people who live there. So I think when we go forward, if it's necessary to hire a part-time person to handle this, I think that would be a fine idea. Thanks, Fred.
Fred?
And just one other comment, Your Worship, and I'm a bit bothered by this, and I'd be looking for direction from either you, because you sit on county council, or maybe staff. Yeah, my comment is we go ahead with this level of effort. So we have all these tourists coming to Mono, and we have to control them. So we have some new no parking zones. We have parking bylaw officers. At the county level, last year in their budget, they had $150,000 to be spent on promoting tourism in Dufferin County. The plans for next year, these are plans. These are not, the budget has not yet been presented. This is in their document, which shows future plans, is to increase that to $450,000. And I guess I'm a bit bothered by that. my sense, look at the money we have to spend on controlling tourists coming to Mono. Do we, and by the way, the first picture in the county's tourism plan is a picture of the lookout thing in Mono Cliffs Park. And I'm just wondering here, like, here we're spending all this money to control the thousands and thousands of tourists that come to Mono. And on the other hand, we have the county that's planning to ramp up the money they spend on attracting tourists here from $150,000 to $450,000. I mean, Your Worship, you have been on county council a lot longer than I have. Do we have a problem here? And if so, what do we do to stop the train wreck?
Well, I look forward to that budget discussion. I think we have to be mindful that the county is attempting to attract people to all parts of the county, including Orangeville and the specific events that occur in Orangeville, assuming that they aren't canceled as a result of COVID. And we also have to be mindful that Orangeville contributes 50 cents to every dollar of revenue to the county. That's not to justify any expenditure, but I'm trying to put it into some sort of context. And obviously, any messaging that the county does that would exacerbate our situation in Mono and lead to greater expense in terms of enforcement is something that we have to be very mindful of and on guard for. So maybe they shouldn't be using that photograph. Saren?
You know, there's a difference between attracting tourists to Broadway in Orangeville with all the shops along there and what we have had happen up there. So up at Mono Cliffs, I think there is a difference. So I would be in favor of encouraging the county to take that picture down. Use something else that's not so obvious. There are lots of good photos in Dufferin County.
I'm sure we can find them one. The other thing I think we have to be mindful of when we talk about enforcement is it's not only parking, it's the host of bylaws that we have and the community standards bylaw that requires vigilance. And it's, as Sharon has said, it's the cost of becoming a mature and professional municipality. I mean, for years we could treat bylaw enforcement very differently than what we now have to presume. Anything further on the report on the parking enforcement? Well, I'm sure that our budget will contain the appropriate amounts of both cost and revenue for that function. And I think, Fred Simpson, you're getting a sense from us that we want to see a continuation of enforcement, mindful that our one-time costs will no longer be a factor, and we can probably do without the OPP paid duty activity. You okay with that?
That's council's direction. We'll make that happen. And yeah, I see a significant drop in the deficit next year compared to this year, where we were looking at, I believe it's close to $100,000 deficit, where even the report, even if it is considered the expenses are higher than we might actually experience, is still talking about half the deficit next year of what we saw this year.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a report from Mark on truck trailers, specifically bylaw enforcement, and this is something that I've been quite vocal about. Mark, do you want to take us through this?
Sure. I think council's had an opportunity to read it. If I could draw 2 points out of that memo for council, the trailer bylaw that keeps getting referenced as needing updating, I would say that it doesn't, because it doesn't deal with truck trailers. What it deals with is RVs in a very limited specific circumstance, and that is you cannot live in an RV in the town of Mono with one exception, and that is when you're building a residence. So we do allow you to put an RV on your property while you're building, so you can live in it and build your house or supervise your building of your house. That's the intent of the trailer bylaw. Where we have always dealt with trailers, and we have dealt with them for 30 years is under the zoning bylaw. There's a lot of items within the zoning bylaw to deal with trailers, locations of trailers, use of trailers. And that's the appropriate place to be dealing with it. We've also had to deal with them in terms of the sign bylaw, and we've also had them parked and encroached on road allowances. So from an enforcement perspective, we do deal with them in a multitude of different ways. It's just assessing the particular circumstance and determining which bylaw or legislation that we are going to move on the particular infractions.
Does anyone have any questions of Mark? Mark, I guess my concern was that the trailer bylaw gives rise to an inference that a trailer can be used for storage, as opposed to being clearer that you can store a trailer on your property. There's
Correct.
a big difference. So I think that the trailer bylaw, with a little bit of tweaking, can clarify that that trailers are not to be used for storage. And we've run into this argument being made, especially with regard to one 53-foot trailer. And I suspect there are other ones, and I've brought staff's attention to one that is currently parked at the corner of the Second Line and Fifth Side Road. And these are clearly being used for storage purposes. And I agree that the zoning bylaw addresses this, but I think people need to understand that one does not get to use a 53-foot trailer for storage purposes, no matter how well intentioned. Did I capture that? Ralph?
Question to you, Mark. So thanks for putting this all together. I understand where the bylaws become effective. I think there's about 4 different bylaws here. My question to you is this a workable situation, or should we be tidying this up and putting it all in one package?
I think for the most part, there's a lot of tools in our toolkit to deal with infraction of trailers. The issue regarding use of trailers for storage we've dealt with regularly, and we will move on property owners with those. Where we're having a problem is I know there was 2 trailers very prominent within the municipality, probably 3. But we're also seeing it with sea cans, if you're familiar. So you've got a lot of sea cans out there. You got a lot of trailers out there being used for storage purposes. And I would also caution, council is also, I wouldn't say part of the problem, but you have also reduced the square footage allowable for people on rural areas to actually build buildings to store materials. So that's, from the decisions you made last year on reducing the accessory building coverage. So we got a lot of different things in play. I'm generally comfortable with what the bylaws say, but I've had 30 years of experience with them. The average person clicking into our website may not be aware of them. And one of the issues that I talked to the mayor about was actually having a, something on the planning website or an FAQ for people to be aware of what they can and can't use trailers and CCANs for. So I can tell you Eugene's very aware of this discussion that council's having, because it will become an enforcement nightmare, I think, for him with the ever increasing use of trailers and CCANs for storage purposes on rural properties. You see it throughout Ontario.
Yes, Ralph? Then Fred?
Mark, just to follow up on that, what about CCANs? Where do they fit in here? They're not a trailer. They function as a trailer without wheels.
They are not, and unless they're being used for a particular use, we have not really taken enforcement actions against them. So for instance, if you're, trying to, we have had an instance where someone was living in CCANs. So we certainly dealt with that one. If you were trying to use it for commercial purposes, that sort of thing, we've been dealing with them. But the average person, when they've been brought onto a property, if they're adequately screened on a property, and we're not getting complaints, we're not moving on it in terms of a bylaw offense. And I would say the same for truck trailers, for that matter. They're becoming less expensive and more available than CCANs. And I think that's why you're seeing them more often now. Again, if you were to move one onto your property and it was well screened on your property, set back behind the house, not a problem for your neighbors. It's, we're generally not moving on enforcement on those. But again, that comes down to how you want to treat your own personal property and how you want to treat your neighbors.
Fred?
What's the CCAN?
Those are, I would say, what you'd see more on they're much larger, but on the rail cans, on the more like a shipping container is probably a better way to put it. Right? No wheels, no motor. They're just a big steel box.
Any further comments with regard to this topic? We may want to revisit the issue of how these CCAMs especially are hidden from view or screened, and maybe the duration of use, so that they don't become a permanent fixture on a property. But I think we're all alive to the issue for a variety of reasons, not the least of which are ones that are in very, at least the 53-foot trailers in very prominent places for long durations of time. Okay, next item is the Melanchthon Council joint meeting. Does anyone have any comments about that? Fred Nix?
Yeah, I think they want a list of the people from Mona who would like to attend. I would like my name to be on that list, and any other councillor that wants to attend should do so. But I would like to say, Your Worship, that I think in telling Melanchthon who's going to be there, that we as individuals are speaking for ourselves. The Mona Council has taken no position on this issue, so we can't go there and say this is how Mona thinks or doesn't think. Okay, we can attend the meeting, but we're speaking for ourselves.
Is everyone in, Sharon?
That sounds good, Fred, but what the question is, they'll be seeking your council's input. So I guess if we say we're just there as individuals, I guess that would work. But it still might be interpreted, Fred, that we want to, that we are speaking for council. Just
Ralph and then Fred again.
I'll pass right now.
Okay, Fred?
Well, I was going to say, Sharon, and I did talk to John about this, that we could pass a motion today and take a position on this issue. But I think in fairness, Shelburne made a delegation to our council. They didn't give us enough information, really, in my view, for us to form a position. They said if they went ahead and took over the fire board, The service would stay the same. That's one good piece of news. They couldn't tell us whether costs would go up or down because they hadn't analyzed it yet. And they couldn't tell us sort of legally how under the 1991 agreement we would affect this change. The danger, of course, being if we as individual municipalities said, okay, we withdraw from the Shelburne District Fire Board, we leave our assets on the table. So there has to be some mechanism, and it's not mentioned in the agreement as to how it works, that the Shelburne District Fire Board is dissolved and that we all still have our assets there. So my position when I spoke to John about this is, unless or until Shelburne gives us a more concrete proposal as to actually what they're asking for, I think it's premature for us to take a position.
Mark, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was going to, I can make it very clear to Denise when I respond to her about attendees that the Town of Mono Council has not taken a position on this matter, but individual councillors will be attending to express their opinion.
Or observe.
Or observe.
Yeah, I spoke to an individual from another municipality who is attending reluctantly and more as an observer because they would agree with us that there isn't enough information to formulate a response to what Shelburne appears to be looking for. Ralph?
I'm just wondering if we shouldn't suggest to Denise that they defer this because even if we attend as individual members, which we're still going to be expressing sort of vague opinions because we haven't got enough information to make a decision on this. So I think it's maybe a little dangerous for us to go there and present opinions because it may be interpreted as well. Councillor Nix said, or Deputy Mayor Nix said this, and Councillor Sharon said this. So I wonder if this is a premature thing and we shouldn't, a better approach would be to suggest that we don't have a council position, and in lieu of that, and a wish to have one, we're waiting for more information from the town of Shelburne, and we'd be quite pleased to take part in a discussion with the other municipalities when the time is right.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that they're going to go ahead with this, and I'd rather be there as an observer than not. If we defer it, the danger is that when it ultimately occurs, we will be expected to have a position, and we still may not be in a position to have a position if Shelburne hasn't answered our questions.
But they want us there so that they can get our ideas to meld with theirs a little bit, and our ideas are not developed enough to do that. Fred has put it quite clearly.
I just think we just tell them that, like we're happy to attend, but we're not there to come to an agreement.
Yeah. I would agree with you, Your Worship. Ralph, I'd like to just observe. They're holding a meeting. Does that mean they have a position? I don't know. I'd just like to listen in. I don't have a position yet.
Any further thoughts? Yeah, I think we're all agreed that we do not have enough information from the town of Shelburne to formulate a position. And that is really our position at this meeting. And maybe Shelburne will reveal more information at this meeting, but I don't think they will. Sharon?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying. Sorry. There was, you had
Well,
the bubble.
maybe Shelburne will reveal more information at this meeting, but I don't think they will.
Okay.
Fred?
It's been 2 hours and 1 minute. Can we have a break for 2 or 3 minutes right now?
After we finish with this matter, are we all done? Mark?
I don't think Shelburne's been invited to this meeting, whether they choose to tune in or get an invite. At least that's my understanding. This was to put a position forward to Shelburne. So that would that's just one comment, but I would just like to know who would like to attend this meeting so that I can provide contact information to Denise.
So it looks like we have one person, the deputy mayor.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we okay with that, Ralph? Do you feel a little bit better if we go in there more as an observer than a participant?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I could attend too. I think we should be very clear to them where we stand, where we are in the process of our thinking about this. That's and maybe you could make that clear in a response, either you or Mark, in a response to Denise.
Okay,
Will do.
thanks. So it's 3 minutes past 11. Why don't we come back at 11:15? Is that agreeable? Okay, recessing until 11:15. back online?
We are back live.
Thank you, everyone, for that short break. Next item, if I can, is the correspondence from CUPE with regard to the OMERS pension plan. And we have some additional input from both OMERS as well as the municipal, the association representing municipal, I guess, CAOs. Is there any discussion or debate about the request of OMERS or any willingness to endorse their position? Fred?
Well, when I read CUPE's letter to us, I was quite prepared to say, sure, let's have a third party to look at them. But then I've only partly read all the responses back from OMERS, so I'm not up to speed. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. What they seem to say is, yes, 2020 was a disastrous year, but by midterm 2021, they were picking up quite quickly. I honestly don't know. Your Worship, what I would also make this comment. This isn't my pension money. It's our staff's. If they've read all these memos, I don't know whether Mona should take a position or not, but I would turn to staff for a bit of guidance. It's their pension.
I agree with you. Any other thoughts? Ralph?
Yeah, along the same line, Fred, I'd like to ask Les if he would comment on this. Was CUPE's financial assessment, do you think that was valid? And then I have something more to say.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I want to address Deputy Mayor's point. It does affect the town of Mono as far as the rates go. Yes, it does affect staff, but based on what investment income OMERS is making, that does affect our rates. So if they're not making the return that they're benchmarking, then the rates may go up, and of course Mono's share goes up. So that's how it affects the town. That's why we got the thing from CUPE. Now, I have to be honest, when I got the notice from CUPE, I was a little bit surprised because as OMERS employee and even retired OMERS employees, we all do get the investment update. I guess I missed 2020's loss, but over the last few years, I always thought OMERS did a pretty good return. Now, what CUPE is, I mean, compared to what I'm getting at the bank, I mean, 8%, whatever, isn't too bad other than last year. Now, what CUPE is doing, they're comparing it to other pension plans like the Teachers Fund. There's a pension plan that they're comparing to BC, and of course, they're all about 3+ more %. And they're thinking, well, why can't OMERS do that? I mean, they do a fair presentation. With their presentation, they sent a supporting letter from a company. I had it written down. The initials PBI. They're financial professionals out of British Columbia. They're all well credited. I looked up their website, and this is the kind of work that they do. They do look at different pension plans for municipalities or provinces or whatever. So that's their background. Now, the OMERS information we all got yesterday, kind of last minute, I found they did make an interesting point. Well, that's all fine. You're comparing us to other pensions, but they don't think it's a fair comparison only because they may have different criteria for investments. They might have a tighter or narrower band into what they can invest. I mean, a good example is ourselves, Town of Mono. We're doing the happy dance when we made 4% last year. Well, that's only because our investment policy is very strict and it keeps us to investments like GICs, banknotes, excuse me, and things like that. Whereas the other investments, we're not sure. Now, I did look up OMERS investment portfolio. There's about 14% in real estate investments and 16% in equities. Now, if they're investing in equities, like I would call blue chip equities, or where banks fall into that, uh, Bell Canada. Well, they took a big hit last year with the economy rolling. This year, they've now turned around to pre-pandemic. If you're looking at real estate, I'm assuming they're owning properties, and any commercial properties with the pandemic, a lot of companies didn't pay their rent. So I'm assuming they lost funds there. So when CUPE says they want to make a comparison, I guess last year pretty well was like the nail in the coffin. But I would say if they want to make that comparison, they should pay for it, because they're suggesting that the stakeholders pay for this review. Well, I'm assuming the stakeholders is OMERS and whoever funds OMERS. So I don't have a problem with them doing a review, but I think they should pay for it.
Well put. Ralph?
Thanks, Les. I'm a mixed thoughts about this. When you look at their earnings, which were, I think, 8.2 or something, compare that with what we or I am doing at the bank, it's very good. They got hammered last year, and the reason they got hammered was because they were in a different, their portfolio was different than the others. They had, I think I looked it up too, they had 30 billion in US investments. And so they had a loss on that, and 2 billion of that was just due to the change in the value of the Canadian dollar. We went up and the US dollar went down. So they lost 2 billion right there. They also, strangely, they were invested in private equities. And when I looked this up, their private equities were in Europe, and a lot of them were in cinema, and the cinemas were all closed. So they just made a bad guess at that, I think. And as Leslie said, the real estate was a problematic as well. So I'm not too sure that last year is something that we should fault them for. They're 3% less than the best of the comparators. What is the review going to do? Well, it's basically going to make suggestions, if anything, about the diversity and the particular aspects of their investment portfolio, and that's a hugely difficult thing to change if you've got $100 billion of investments or so. So I doubt that it's going to go anywhere. The PBI is a very reputable actuarial firm that does deal with this type of issues. So when they recommend that it's a good idea, I'm really not sure, how to take that. I suspect there's more in the back alley, if you'd like, about this. The CEO and the chief investment officers in 2020 took a multi-million-dollar bonus at a time when they were losing money, and that may really have pissed CUPE off. I don't know. It probably would piss me off. So I'm not too strong on making a recommendation to do a review here. I think that just the fact that CUPE has brought this up and has created a lot of concern about this, that OMERS probably has put, they're on notice that they got to be make sure their act is as good as it can be.
Fred?
I agree with what Ralph said. And just totally parenthetically, I would throw in, I looked up the Canada Pension Plan, their latest returns as of September of this year. Their average annualized rate of return over the last decade has been 11.6% per year, which that's the only pension I had, by the way, Canada Pension Plan. So anyway, I agree with what Ralph said. I'm just not sure we should get involved in this.
Any further, Melinda?
Yeah, no, I completely concur with Ralph's comments and Les's comments. Thanks too. Does it really matter? I mean, I know that you said that it matters. I know you said that it matters that to the town about whether the return is good or whatever. But I mean, does it matter whether we're not directing, right? I mean, they're just asking for our opinion, correct? that it isn't up to us to order it. To me, to have somebody come in and analyze what's already been done and so on just seems to me to be a lot of money that you're going to spend on not much return. And if you're worried about losing money, then why spend money on things that aren't going to definitely give you a return? But do we have to make a decision? Was that the bottom line?
Ralph?
No, they're just asking us to join the call for a review. So we don't need to do anything. And I presume they've sent this to all the municipalities who are involved with OMERS.
Yeah, it looked like it was a form letter. Mono Town Council was just kind of inserted in the, yeah.
I take the position that if our employees are concerned about this, that we should consider going to bat. But if they're not concerned, I mean, as Freddie said, it's not our pension plan. It's the plan that our employees are part of. And Les is correct. We pay into it and we're affected by performance. But you know, I'm loath to get involved because historically OMERS has been a really good plan with great performance, and I think you know, the last year was an anomaly. If I hear that our employees share the concerns of CUPE, I could be persuaded to endorse CUPE's position. I don't think it matters one way or another whether we endorse CUPE's position, by the way. Anything further?
If I could just add a comment as an employee.
Yeah, if you hear of any rumblings from you know, Mono staff about this, let us know and maybe we can revisit it. But in the meantime, I'm content to leave it as it is if other members of council are as well.
Right. No, I was just going to say, I mean, the one comment that came in the information from OMERS yesterday was they never missed a pension payment to anyone in all their history. So regardless of performance or whatever, people are still getting their pension as is calculated based on their years of service.
And they're not missing on any indexing or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Okay. Last item, until we get to the points that we've brought forward for Schedule A, is the extension of appointment to the TRCA, Regional Watershed Alliance. And I do have a motion, which I'll read and look for a mover and seconder, and then we can discuss. Whereas on October 10th, the 2017 Council appointed Mr. David Dice as Mono's representative to the TRCA Regional Watershed Alliance for a 4-year term ending in December of 2021, and whereas the TRCA wishes to align appointments with the municipal term of council, and whereas the term of council ends on November 14th, 2022, therefore it be resolved that council for the town of Mono extends the appointment of Mr. David Dice to November 14th, 2022. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. Discussion. Fred.
Yeah, I talked to Dave about this last week, and he's happy that if we extend his term. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely clear on what this Watershed Alliance does. But hey, it doesn't hurt us, and Dave wants to stay on it, so that's fine.
Okay. Maybe he could give us a brief report at some point. It could be done in writing. Sharon?
No, I basically was agreeing with Fred. Dave's the right man for the job.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Or pardon me, any opposed? It appears the motion is carried. And then to the matters moved forward at the request of councillors. Councillor Magdalow, you had some matters that you wanted to move forward.
Yes, I think you approved the moving item 4, Mona Waterway signage report, up into section Roman numeral 7. So this is not a part of Schedule A any further, and I'd be pleased to present that whenever you'd like.
Yes, please.
So this to me was a very interesting project. We approved it as a council about 2 years ago. Now. It was held up a little bit by COVID and other things. I did not realize it at the time, but it was also a project from the council of 2000, June of 2000, which they asked the staff to provide signage to road crossings, all waterway road crossings. And the project was not completed because of difficulties with determining the correct names. So I went into this with my eyes wide open and thinking that we were going to have some problems here. One was very interesting with respect to waterways. You know, we have these 4 watersheds, as you all know, with the credit and the Regional Conservation Authority covering the Humber down to the south, and most of our area is in Ottawasaga, and mostly the flows are from west to east, which makes it interesting because it means that individual waterways crossed by multiple lines. And for example, the south Nottawasaga is crossed 7 times by bridges, and the north is crossed 6 times. So it's from a waterway standpoint, we're very, very fortunate in what we have here. I found when I would drive over a waterway and I sort of, if I pay any attention to it at all, I would say, what is that anyway? And so I think knowing the name is very important. We use names all the time. I introduce myself, hi, I'm Ralph. People have some connection there. But it's helpful to know what is the name of something in terms of respecting it and protecting it. So that was the background to this. So all of the 41 waterways were visited by myself, and I talked to mainly Matt. Mike was away at that time, Matt Donor, and we discussed the various names, and we discussed which ones we should use, and we selected of the 40 crossings, we selected 30, I think it was 32 for namage, for signage, I should say. And the basis for deciding whether a waterway should be signed was its size, that it was visible from the road, maybe its hydrogeographical significance. For instance, the Bailey Creek it's a very interesting one because it's at the confluence of 4 little creeks that all come together and form the Bailey Creek, which goes on for about 35 kilometers to the east before joining with the Nottawasaga. So that's the headwaters of the Bailey Creek right here. The signage was placed as a single sign for many of the locations, and 2 signs for a long bridge where you wanted to have a sign at both ends. Public Works placed these in October of this year and completed the project very, very quickly. The last, I think it's page 4, shows you a map of Mono, and all of the signs are itemized there. If you're looking at it, it says SS means single sign, DS means double sign. Notably, we did not put signage on all the roads in Mono because some of them were county roads, and Mr. Dunmore is having some conversations with the county. It'd be nice to have signage on these roads as well. It's interesting that the challenge of getting the names was not that difficult, although it was compounded by COVID. In some locations where I felt that the river waterway was in some dispute, I would leave a letter in the mailbox of adjacent homeowners and see if they had any input, and that was helpful in one occasion, particularly for Pendleton up in the northeast corner of the Mono. I also found the various conservation authorities. I spoke to the shall we say, the river guys in each of the conservation, three of the conservation authorities, and that was very helpful. I spoke to some other long-term residents, such as Bob Shirley and John Riley. I spoke to some long-term farm people who had multiple generations here, and so we're fairly happy with the naming. The decision, or in some places, I think were 3 names, was to put a double name on the sign, so it would say North Branch, Nottawasaga River, known locally as the Elba Creek. So we've sort of covered the waterfront in terms of both names. And it may be that more information will come up from people who'll see these and say, hey, that's really known as Nix's Creek. And we can always make some. So I'm very appreciative for the work that the Public Works did in getting these in place. And we'll have something on the website which will give reference to it. I think it's a way to help respect our natural heritage and to help to protect it.
Thank you. Any questions for Ralph? Fred?
No, I just want to thank Ralph for doing this job. It's great. And there, I have one confession, Ralph.
Yes.
Back whenever it was 2000, when they did name all the creeks, and I think Bob Shirley was on that committee, I ended up with a map of the town with all the creeks named, and I've lost it. I've searched high and low. It's gone. I don't know what happened to it, Ralph. 20 years ago.
Is it
anyway.
a great 3 by 3 inch map?
It was a great big map.
Well, I've got it right here.
Oh, terrific. You know, the only one, Ralph, I would say where it's always been confusing in my mind, what's the subdivision north of Cardinal Woods called? I think it's Masters Creek.
Master,
Well,
yes.
That's always been confusing because the creek is McMaster, and the subdivision, I think, was supposed to be named after the creek, and they dropped the MC. They just call it Masters Creek. So I've never been entirely clear on whether that creek was McMaster or Master.
Well, I don't know. You probably know more about it than I do, Fred. We've gone with the, I say the royal we. We've gone with this historical accuracy and called it McMaster's Creek, or McMaster Stream, actually.
Well, I'd like to join in thanking Ralph for his initiative here, and I'd forgotten all about this back in the year 2000. But going back to the discussion we had earlier in the meeting about valuing our water resources, I think it's more important than ever to acknowledge these rivers and creeks and waterways throughout town. And I know that a little bit of heat on Facebook over this and how much did it cost and so forth. But the reality is I believe it's worth it. And I can attest personally to the fact that it's noticed. There is a tiny little creek up in northern Ontario that crosses the Trans-Canada Highway named Creelman Creek. It was named after my father, who was the surveyor of the nearest town back in the 1930s. And every once in a while, somebody sends me a picture of it. So it is noticed and appreciated.
If I could just make an addition, the cost of this was largely covered by a grant, the Main Street Revitalization Initiative.
Thank you. And Fred?
Just one tiny, not a correction, Ralph. I mean, we do belong to 3 conservation authorities. We claim we're the headwaters of these 3 rivers, the Humber, the Nottawasaga, and the Credit. In fact, we're not. The Nottawasaga starts in Amaranth, but don't tell Amaranth that. But the other thing you should add to that, Ralph, is we actually have a few acres of land in the Grand River drainage area. So we actually have 4 rivers that either start or have some part of them starting here in Mono.
And you can see that on the map, Fred. You're quite right. And it's just a little different color, and it's just above the 15th Side Road.
Yep.
Just exiting to the west.
Sharon?
I also wanted to thank Ralph for all the work, and he did have help, certainly Matt. And there are people who are noticing, and it's really fun actually to drive around and see these signs yourself and remind you. I mean, I won't know the totally local name for the water that I'm passing over. I may understand that it's part of the Nottawasaga or something like that, but I love seeing those signs. That's just a great plan. And I know that it's taken up a considerable amount of your time. So thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you. The next item that was a pull forward from Schedule A was the letter to the town of Orangeville with regard to the Maple Inn. Does anyone want to address that? Ralph?
I asked for that, I think, Your Honor, and simply to say, I thought, Mark, you really put that letter together very well. You capsulized all the essential concerns, so it's just a hand clap for you.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Fred?
Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say. I just want.
Yeah, me too.
We've lost her. Okay, Sharon?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say, that Mark wrote a really good letter, but is there anything that I see it's
Any reaction?
Was there any reaction?
Dave?
Thank you, Mayor Krellman. I do have a report I still can bring it forward to the 23rd November. Mark suggested maybe I give a verbal update, so that's what I'm going to do. So I did reach out to the planning department in Orangeville, with respect to the inquiries Mark had in his letter. So what I got back was they don't think they need a second statutory public meeting because they think it's going to be repetitive given recirculation to the same folks. Okay. And probably irrespective of comments come through the SHIP meetings, repetition on the comments and concerns side of things. So that's what I heard back, and to go through the process. Anyway, the other point was the emphasis towards those SHIP meetings, two of which have already happened, the 3rd and 10th of November. The first one of which I do believe Councillor Manctalo and Councillor Nix were in attendance, as well as some local folks from the Starview area. The last meeting...
Councillor Davies and myself were also there.
Yes, I'm sorry, correct. So then there is one more SHIP meeting, which is December the 1st.
My apologies for interrupting. I was there at the last meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And then there's one more on the 1st. And that subsequent to that, the Orangeville planning department expects to bring, I think they want to bring a recommendation report to the December 6th Orangeville council session. So that's the intent at this point in time.
Fred?
Yeah, and I should just say, and anyone else I only attended the first SHIP meeting, but a lot of the concerns we originally had were dissipated. I was actually quite impressed with the SHIP people. The only issue then that I had was why they had not communicated any of this information to us, and I don't think under the Planning Act they were required to, or why the town of Orangeville hadn't communicated this to us. But yeah, I know, Dave, you're right. I see your finger going up. But anyway, if the public is listening, and if you didn't listen to that first SHIP meeting, which I attended, I'm actually quite impressed with what their plans are calling for the motel.
Sharon?
I do understand that they're going to be on the December 1st meeting. There are going to be a lot of people, concerned people from Starview area that are going to be on that meeting. And I tend to agree with Fred that we had, the first meeting certainly seemed to clear up a number of the problems that I personally had with what has been going on there. And I haven't heard, and if there are only 2 people living there and at the motel right now, they will be gone by the end of November. And I have not heard any complaints about actions on the street or any issues at all since that meeting and since we were told there were only 2 people there.
Dave?
Yeah, I just want to add one further thing, a point of clarity on my point. So mea culpa here. I had in my report previous said it was a shelter, but I was using that term loosely. In the supportive housing world, that has a specific meaning, which means something like a Salvation Army drop-in center. And that is not what's going there. It's they're going to be independent units, housing units, apartment units, I guess, if you want to refer to them that way. And the other point is that although it was alluded to in my report about refurbishing the windows and so forth on that motel, or what was a motel building, they're actually going to be closed up. The access will be through a central hallway through a front door. So no one can just come out like you could in a motel room independently. There will be control through an administrative area front at the side of the building, or one side of the building. Jury's still out, as far as I know, as to whether it'll be round the clock security, but I heard it may be from 3 in the afternoon to 7 in the morning. I think SHIP is considering that as some form of either on-site administration and or security to that question and concern. But no, there won't be independent access out into what would be an existing parking area. It's going to be through a controlled entrance.
Ralph? And Fred?
I was reassured by listening into this meeting. It was good to see, I call it the face of SHIP, because I thought that they put on a pretty good demonstration of being an organization that was doing a good work and trustworthy. I have a question for Dave. Dave, I didn't quite catch, what stage of the process is this going to be at taking place at the December meeting, Orangeville Council?
So they've had the one statutory public meeting. There was a request for a second.
Right.
It would appear that Orangeville doesn't want to do that. They're relying on the SHIP meetings that have happened with one to go. Again,
Right.
December 1st coming up. And so on the 6th of December, my understanding is they're bringing forward a recommendation report. So what that means is the Orangeville Planning Department is going to, I assume, express a professional opinion either with regards to the 2 amendments, the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment.
Fred?
Yeah, and just to broaden the subject a little bit, putting aside 236 First Street and whatever Orangeville decides to do with that, the problem over the summer was that it was acting as a shelter for some homeless people, mainly men, most of them with problems, either mental or addiction. And now that we've taken care of, or SHIP has taken care of what's going to happen to 236 First Street, it still leaves the issue in this area of some members of our society, mainly men, but not totally, that are out there without a place to live, whether it's a shelter or a permanent home. I had a long conversation yesterday with Anna McGregor, a very good conversation. And the county has some responsibility to do something about this, but we have 3 or 4 or 5 other organizations involved. We have SHIP itself, which may or may not get involved with homeless people and talk. They've talked to the Sally Ann about having a shelter up here. That they looked at it and the numbers and the costs were prohibitive. They looked at the John Howard Society and they wouldn't do it. The Choices people did run a shelter for a few months last year, but the issue came down to funding. But the bigger problem is, we still have some homeless people in the area, but all of these various groups are not in we have a task force that Sandy Brown is kind of the leader on. for homeless people in Orangeville. As an outsider observing this, I think I see this problem. All of those groups are not talking to each other. That's a bit of a difficulty right now.
Melinda?
I asked SHIP about the people that are there and that was when the comment came up that, there's only 2 left now and they're going to be gone and so on. But like, well, what happened to the people that were there that were causing the problem in the summertime? And they said that they had helped to place all those people. But it just kind of hung there. It's like, okay, well, that's great. But it just kind of hung there as, well, whoa, place, where? And there really still is a need. And it is, I don't know whether because our winters are milder or because there's just more people in the world, but it's everywhere. And here, noticeably, there are more homeless people that are just visible. And yes, we need to address that. That's my comment.
Yeah, if I can be of assistance, choices and SHIP are one and the same now. SHIP has taken over choices, and it's correct that they did run a short-lived program for homeless men, but ran out of funds, and there is still an effort afoot to create a men's shelter. Unfortunately, that became conflated with the debate over this location, when in fact it's really 2 separate discussions.
Your Worship, it's interesting because yes, they are connected, but both times both meetings that I attended, the CEO made a distinction to say that, just to be transparent, we are connected with choices because we lend them our bookkeeper and we have a board member that sits on both boards, but they really wanted to make it out there in the public that they are separate, which was just, I was very interested in that.
I agree with you, but I know for a fact that SHIP took over choices because I know the previous chair of the choices board, and it was a friendly assumption of responsibility for choices. They run choices as a youth shelter, as it was originally, and then SHIP has other other programs that it runs. I did ask in the course of the first meeting whether they had any members of the Dufferin community on their board of directors, and the answer was yes, which I was gratified to hear. So, okay, I'm disappointed to hear that they will not, town of Orangeville will not hold a second public meeting. And they may just be setting up a situation where, as Councillor Martin indicates, a large number of people are going to descend on that December meeting of council. But I too was gratified by the SHIP meeting that I attended. I'm assuming that the second one and the third one, to be held on the 10th of December, will be equally informative. They did a good job. Okay, any other items? Oh, Mark?
Just wondering what council wished to do with this matter. Did you want it to come back? Or are you satisfied with the application and the information that you've received? Just through a formal process, because my letter is hanging out there and we haven't actually said no comment or no concerns, or we have comments. So just looking for direction on it.
Councillor Martin, did you have a comment?
I would wait for Dave Trotman. See what he has to say first.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Appreciate it. I mean, my only follow-up would be, I can bring this report back to the 23rd. Maybe I should, because I can ask for direction subsequent to the December 1st SHIP meeting, which I can also attend. It's online, I think. And then, of course, secondarily, if council may, well, regardless of whether Orangeville Council makes a decision on the 6th, I can report back to council on December 14th as a summary.
Sorry, I misspoke by saying November 10th. It had just come and gone. Councillor Nix, did you have your hand up?
Well, if Mark is looking for direction or Dave, I mean, I actually think in fair, yes, I thought Orangeville should hold a second public meeting, and that's what the town of Mono has requested in its letter. Having said that, given that SHIP now is holding these series of meetings, I think that partly fulfills what would have occurred at a public meeting by Orangeville Council. I think, maybe not in a technical sense, Dave, but certainly in a chance for the public to listen to what SHIP is going to do, and a good chance for them the public to air their views. So I think Mono can sort of rest assured now that the public is being both informed and given an opportunity to express their views.
I can ask or reiterate through the Orangeville Planning Department, and I think SHIP has reached out to local residents to let them know about these 3 meetings, 2 of which have already happened, of course, and certainly for this 3rd one on the 1st of December. Just to add a bit more clarity on the reasons why no second meeting, part of the response was, well, nothing materially has changed with the proposal in terms of how the building is going to be used and for what. I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just saying that was part of the reasoning for we don't feel another statutory public meeting is required, but the SHIP meetings ought to suffice. That was pretty much the flavor of the response.
Thank you. Ralph? And Fred?
Question to Mark. Mark, have we as a town responded to what made our comments yet?
The only response was what I provided to the clerk of the town.
Right. So you're looking for, your question really is, do we have a further response that we'd like to make?
Yes. Yes. I mean, you do have time. We can put any additional information. Maybe the planning report's available from the town of Orangeville prior to your next meeting.
I think a lot of the issues have been addressed fairly satisfactory, but we should respond to these issues as being satisfactorily addressed and our concerns for them. So I think that we should have a response, which the response should back up the concerns of the residents, which I think are largely taken care of. So that's one point, is that I think we should have a response, and that'd be, you'd craft it appropriately, Mark. The other issue is that these meetings that SHIP has had, the 2 of them all so far, 1 to go, are a good means for the residents to hear from SHIP and for them to understand that SHIP is it seems to be a good organization. However, it's not Orangeville Council. And they should have a second meetings which allows the residents to tell Orangeville Council their concerns. And so I think that should be another part of this letter, that we recommend that the Orangeville Council have a second open meeting, because the concerns of the residents had not been fully addressed or be able to address.
Melinda?
Well, I guess, I mean, that's where we're at that junction already, right? We've asked them to do that, and they've said no. We're not going to, through Dave. They haven't sent a full-on. That was just a conversation, right? It isn't a correspondence that they've sent. And it seems to me that maybe waiting is the right thing to, yes, respond, or not respond, but ask them. I mean, they haven't responded to us, so to further clarify. But after they have their council meeting, right after they get the SHIP does their thing for the 3, and I would assume that their report will then say either, yeah, you know, all the neighbors are all hunky-dory, it's not a problem, or yes, there are these specific concerns continue. You know, okay, council, now what do you want to do? And then to see whether they do something. No, I mean, because if we keep asking just for another meeting, our information or our concerns are being aired by the people, to the people who it matters at the moment, right? With SHIP. I mean, SHIP still is waiting for the planning approval, right? That's what they still don't have the approval.
Dave?
So just to follow up on that, Councilor Davey, so again, just to reiterate, yeah, the last SHIP meeting is December 1st. I think I'm going to be online to attend that one just to hear the summary and fulsomeness of what's being said and the concerns, of course. Then on the December 6th Orangeville Council sitting. Now, I can only presume that will be, there will be some opportunity for people to make comments before Orangeville Council makes a decision. I'm going to find that out. And I think I will bring this report back on the 23rd of November to our council and add that clarity as well, if that's an option. And then that will at least be in our report. So Mona residents will know, yes, they can be online, of course, hopefully, and attend on will be online to make comment on the 6th of December at Orangeville. I don't know that yet, but I'm presuming that would be possible.
Mark?
The November 23rd meeting will be the last opportunity. This council will have to put their collective voice forward to Orangeville. So we'll use that as a game plan and bring back the information we have at that time. I'm sure Orangeville will have their meeting open to the public on the 6th. That does not stop them from proceeding with the approval. So if this council wishes to have a collective voice on the record, it's appropriate that you do that at the 23rd. So there's already a draft report being prepared, so we'll get that out for you for next week's meeting.
Okay. I think we have to be mindful that our residents may only have an opportunity to weigh in on the 6th of December in front of Orangeville Council if they are signed up as delegations. Otherwise, there's question period, but delegate status is probably the only way that they're going to be recognized at that meeting, unless Orangeville changes its mind and has a second public meeting under the Planning Act. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Yeah, correct.
Fred?
Well, and if Mono is going to take a position, I would make the argument, and I'm open to be dissuaded, that we should say that we are happy with the zoning change, because in my mind, first of all, we've seen what SHIP is going to do. If they don't get the zoning change, there's a possibility that motel will be under the current zoning, which means it can't be used for affordable housing, which means those units would still be sitting there and could be used for all kinds of purposes that maybe we're not too happy with. So my assumption is the only way we can go forward and have SHIP build affordable housing units, small units there, is for the zoning change to go ahead.
Mark?
I think that's, I appreciate your comments, Deputy Mayor Nix, and I think that's totally fair, but I think it should be debated when you've got the report before you at your next meeting.
Let's hold off until the next meeting, and we'll get a report and make a decision as to where we go from here. Were there any other items on Schedule A that we were bringing forward? Ralph?
I brought forward number 6, the NVCA report. Just to mention that the issues of mandatory programs is an ongoing one. The regulations will come into force January the 1st, but they're calling them deliverables are not due until December 31st of 2024. In other words, three years away. This thing's ongoing, but anyway, that's just wanted to bring you up to date on that.
Thank you. Sharon?
I did ask for number 9. That's the one about the environmental assessment amendment. And how does that affect Mono? Is there anything? Thanks, Mark.
Through you, Your Worship, sorry to jump in. This is all part of the Conservatives' redrafting of the EA process. we're not experts on staff when it comes to EA process and municipal projects. We'd certainly leave it to Burnsides and specifically Gord Feniak for his interpretation on the EA Act. It's it's quite a convoluted process. This is following on changes that were made in July of last year that was based on EA projects, based on who was undertaking the project, not what the project was. So if you had I guess what they're trying to do is close a loophole that, and I think the example they used was a hydro line. So if Ontario Hydro wasn't doing the project, but it was being done by a contractor thereof of hydro, then it wouldn't be covered by the EA process. So it's really just defining that. It's a minor amendment. And other than that, I don't have any other information. But again, we would be relying on our engineers and our legal advice as to whether a particular project requires an EA.
Thank you.
Anything else from Schedule A? Okay, I have a motion that we accept Schedule A to this agenda, and do I have a mover? Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mix. Any opposed? That motion is carried. Reports of members of council and staff. Shall we start with the staff first? Who wants to go ahead? Mark?
I don't have a particular report, and I'm going to throw Les under the bus here because I know he was going to report on the employee vaccinations because that due date was yesterday for advising on whether or status of vaccination. So,
Okay. Les, do you have anything to report on that topic?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Of the current active employees, 36 of them, 34 are fully vaccinated. One employee is partially vaccinated, so they have their 1 dose and we're working with them to get the 2nd dose. And then we do have one staff person that is not vaccinated at all. They'll be going into the testing protocol next week, and we'll work with our 2 staff people.
just to clarify, Les, the employee that you classified as not being vaccinated at all, I would not word it that way. I would say that they have not advised us as to their
Okay,
status.
that's true. That is true. That is true.
Okay. And our part-time people, are they inclusive?
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor?
Part-time people inclusive of that number? Contract,
No, this is just full-time staff. Any of our part-time staff were laid off at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
So that's why I had said our active staff.
Sharon?
And that, sorry, just to clarify before Councillor Martin, those numbers do not include any staff currently on leave for whatever reason.
Okay. Sharon?
I just wondered if all the councillors have reported their status.
Oh, that was going to be, yeah, Mark threw me off a little bit in my report. But yes, we have 100% participation from council. Thank you.
Very
Shows
good.
good leadership. Now, to be honest, I have my HR hat right now. I was having trouble with the treasurer fellow, but he came.
Les, while we have you, anything further to report?
No, on that point, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, do you want to return to anything?
No, I didn't have anything else to report, Your Worship.
Are any other members of staff online and would like to report? Mike?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to bring you up to speed on the Brookfield wastewater treatment plant. Looks like they got the majority of the sand imported to the site, and we'll be having some meetings in in the next week or so to understand whether they're going to try and get the piping in for the beds or whether they're going to hold off till spring. We did have the Ministry of the Environment stop in. All permits are in place now, and the Ministry of the Environment was happy to see what was ongoing. We'll be starting our internal audits for the drinking water systems this week. I got a meeting today at 1:30 for our first part of the audit. Our afternoon shift complement for seasonal workers is full, and we started yesterday, so we now have our afternoon shift in place for the upcoming weather events. And just notice that the MVCA is putting out a stormwater management technical working group, and either myself or Matt Donor will be sitting on that group with Ryan Post in the coming months. I believe in the new year that'll start, and that'll be focusing on protecting the MVCA watershed from a stormwater management perspective.
Thank you. Sharon?
I just wondered, Mike, is the work that's being done in the yard, is it finished? I just saw the fence is still there and there's still some upturned soil. I just wondered, is it finished or?
So
okay.
they completed the pressure tests on the new fuel lines. We're not receiving fuel from the tanks yet, but they did backfill the trench, so the pressure test obviously went good. And there will be the old pump removal and a large hole for the existing tanks that are underground. Those still have to be removed yet. And then we'll be looking at screening and some landscaping probably in the next week or so with respect to the new above ground tank system.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the charging station installation. I gather it's not live yet, but I can't wait to see Fred and Ralph avail themselves of that opportunity.
Thank you. The contractor that the county had awarded this tender, they worked very well with us and did a good job. We're waiting on the Electrical Safety Authority, though. It's all done. We did have the shutdown, as Deputy Mayor Nix is aware. He lost power to a meeting, so sorry about that. But my understanding is there's a soft glow on the light unit that's above the charging station for the flow system, and that'll signify it's on. And I'm just reviewing some paperwork from the county. I don't think it's reached county council yet. For the memorandum of understanding between the county and the town of Mono. That will outline how the town of Mono is going to be reimbursed for the electrical usage. And we're trying to sort through what the costing, if any, in the first year would be to people that utilize the charging station. So there will be some staff, other than snow removal in front of it, which is pretty simple. I don't know what that looks like on a Saturday and Sunday because we don't touch this parking lot on a Saturday and Sunday, but there will be some staff requirements for, we'll have to check it out if there's errors being reported on the web app that's going to be utilized, but we're hoping that it's minimal staff involvement.
Any further questions of Mike? Any other members of staff who'd like to report? Dave?
Thank you, Mayor Croman. Just a few things. We have a planning committee meeting on November the 18th coming up. It's an overview of the transition from the tribunals, from OMB through to LPAT, now OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal. So I'm going to present planning committee with that overview at the behest of their chairman. November 25th is committee of adjustment. We have applications upcoming for that meeting date. The hotel site plan review is continuing underway, and there's a focus now on the servicing component to that. through to and including what would be a certificate from the MECP, the Ministry of Environment. And so we have to respond back to that probably through our good engineer. There's still more to do, but at least that's another step on that particular project. I met with Councillor Martin and the assistant Susan yesterday on the motion regarding the Realtor's Guide, excuse me. And we have some ideas, I think, that we're going to try and pursue regarding to get the message out to good folks coming to Mono about our bylaws and how they work and their importance and the planning process and things of that nature. So we've got a few good ideas, I think. I see Sharon smiling because we had an epiphany yesterday and thought, aha, there is a way maybe to do this. So that will probably come forward at a future meeting. I'm guessing because we have to get some local realtors involved. We're probably thinking in the new year, only to let the current realty business or year, as it might be, sort of die down leading up to Christmas. And that's what we'll do. We'll come back in the new year with a report. There's a few things we got to do. None of it rocket science, but there's a few logistical things we got to work out. But I think we've got a pretty good hold on what might be a useful and effective approach. As for Monster Homes, I do have a report in draft, and I'm going to I'm going to hopefully get it for the 23rd of November, but I'm going to humbly request council have patience and if I have to bring it back for the December 14th meeting. I just have a bit more work to do on one of the amendments. There's two components there, right? How or where or if we're going to actually amend the official plan in addition to the zoning bylaw. So if it's not the 23rd, I will certainly have something for the 14th. That's it for me. Thanks.
Fred?
Yeah, Dave, on the hotel application that's going to be coming forward, and you might have told me this earlier, but I can't remember. They have to do studies to show that they have a water source and a way of dealing with this sewage treatment. Are they going to dig their own well or drill their own well, or are they going to can they hook up to the Cardinal Woods well system?
The design right now is that they have their own well on site.
Okay, I just asked that because then that would be what we call a private well. And under the agreement we just approved of today, we don't take into account water usage from private wells. So that's mainly the car dealerships along Highway 10. But once you start getting into a hotel, you're looking at significantly more water. I guess I'm curious about then, is there any potential impact here on our water quantity threat from having a hotel there? And do they have to look at that, or is it our responsibility? Or in improving their plans, can we ask or demand that they provide us with data from that drilled well on water takings?
The feasibility of that well is going to be part and parcel of the review leading through the site plan process. They do also plan on having a holding tank, so that's going to be part of their operational solution, I suppose you might say, for on-demand water. That's where it stands right now, though.
Are they going to handle that on their own property, or is there any thought that they could? I think there's excess capacity in the Watermark plant, is there not?
I'll let our good Mr. Dunmore speak to that matter, or perhaps Mark. There is, but I think it's been assigned.
I was going to say that's correct. When council approved the assumption of the Watermark facility, one of the components you did do was assign the remaining water quantity to Watermark or to Page for a limited time period. I think the survey, your questions are very good, Councillor Nix, but until we've seen the reports coming from the consultant, I couldn't tell you what sort of volumes we're looking at and whether whether we're going to be bringing in these private wells if they're not going any further than, say, a residential well. I expect they will, but if it's for fire protection only, they may not.
or for use within the building.
Anything further for Dave? Dave, just on the monster homes, I think, you know, my suggestion is take your time, get it right. Having said that, do we have any municipal approvals of late that look like we have more on the horizon?
Not that I see, no.
Okay.
I just have to be careful of precedent and that the language and the policy in the zoning bylaw doesn't trigger multitude of minor variances and things of that nature. So it's not rocket science, but I've reached out to a few other municipalities. It's been a bit of a tricky process for some of them. That's not to say it cannot be done, but yeah, I'd like to give myself that extra time if needed for the 14th of December. But I'm targeting for the 23rd. I'll just see how things go. That's all.
I think council is supportive of taking your time and getting it right and making it bulletproof.
Thank you.
Any other staff reports? I don't see anyone else online. Okay, council reports. Who would like to go first? Brett?
Yeah, the Headwaters Streams Committee on the 10th of November planted 100 fairly large trees down in the Albion Hills Conservation Authority. That was with TRCA. Just to remind council, the MOU the Headwaters Streams Committee has with the town allows us to spend money anywhere in Dufferin County. But when we do work with TRCA, which is not in Dufferin County, this is just volunteer time. There was no money involved. On the 11th of November, I attended the county council meeting, and there's a lot of news there. The one I would just draw to council's attention, and Les, I hope you're listening, we were told as a heads up report that it looks, they haven't got their budget ready yet, but it'll be very difficult for them to keep their budget to 5% or less in terms of an increase. In other words, they're looking at more than a 5% increase. That concerns me, as John Creelman well knows, because I've told him about my concerns. On the 12th of November, most of us attended a water tour with Mike Dunmore, and I have to really compliment Mike on how good that was and how much he explained to us. And I hope there's not a test on it, because I wouldn't be able to pass it. But it was a great tour, Mike, and I appreciate that. That's all from me, Your Worship.
Thank you. Ralph, do you have anything?
I have two items, Your Honor. One is with respect to the Mona Pollinator Garden, and then the other is a hopefully not too long report on the Board of Health. The Pollinator Garden is finishing the planting of the south plot, and this has been almost a Herculean task in the mud. I think we had 5 individual days where we dug up weeds there, and it could be titled Wheelbarrows in the Mud. Anyway, the plan is to, we purchased wildflower seeds. I'm not sure we're going to put them in this fall. As you know, the wildflower seeds usually have to be frozen and thawed again. This can be done artificially, and they can be put in the spring. So that decision will have to be made. I walked over there yesterday, and it really is a mud bath. Second is I'd like to tell you about the Board of Health. They've given us sort of an end-of-year type of report on a few items. One is with respect to finance. The COVID expenses are the cost to operate outside of the operating budget. COVID expenses to date are $13 million. The ministry has provided a partial payment for this, and that it's expected they will likely cover the entire amount. And there will be some ongoing costs. The costs are mostly personnel, 76% personnel. Personnel who worked late, worked over weekends, and new personnel that were hired. As you probably all are aware, the third dose is available and it's being provided through the Board of Health. I'm not sure that it's being provided by pharmacies. The Board of Health are calling people up based on their age. So it's 70 and over at the moment. I had mine a week ago. The board is very concerned about hackers, as they should be. They outlined their work that they've done to try and make the board secure. And I think they've done a very good job. I'm not an expert in this, but it really sounded very good. They keep all of their, I guess I can't tell you any details, so it'd be a bad idea. They settled their payroll. This has been an ongoing thing. The payroll salaries, their salaries they settled, I should say, and they've been in negotiations for about a year. They settled for, this is for most of the people that work there, for a 1.75% increase for next year and the 2% increase for 2023. Just to give you a bit of an up-to-date on that, today, the reproductive rate is slightly, which is the so-called R value, is slightly above 1. So that's always not a good sign because it predicts an increase in the number of cases. However, the number of active cases in mono is 1, and the number of active cases in Orangeville is 1 at the moment. The vaccination rate overall, I don't know for mono, but vaccination rate overall for Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph is 86.5%. The other interesting statistic is that hospitalizations are very interesting in terms of who's there, and it's mostly the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated patients appear to have a 12 times greater admission rate for population of unvaccinated and versus vaccinated people. So that's what's keeping this pandemic going. And also it may be that children are also keeping it going because the incidence of infection that's totally asymptomatic in children is a little bit higher than it is in adults, probably around 50%. So I welcome the addition of children's vaccination, which will be coming very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
Ralph, that R value, that in simple language, that's the percent of the people who get tested who are in fact have COVID, right?
Transmission rate.
Not exactly. The R value is, in simple terms, if the R value is 1, it means that every infected person will infect one other person. If the R value is 1.2, it means they'll infect 1.2, and they'll keep going up. And so that it's important to get your R value under 1. And the R value is only as accurate as your testing, so that it's a bit of a soft number.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Any other, Sharon?
Not to those points. I thank you, Ralph, for that. Very instructive. I had a productive meeting yesterday with Susan and David, and he's absolutely right. Some ideas came up that I never even considered. So that's always good. And the only other thing is we had an appreciation for our volunteers. We had a bit of a luncheon, and you know, it's so important to thank the people who are doing work for Mono for a couple of sandwiches. You know, it's really good, and they have had to work in smaller groups, and the numbers of people who actually physically volunteer has certainly gone down. And I think that that's true in a lot of situations, and I hope that we can bring them back at some point. But it was a very enjoyable luncheon, and being in person, a lot of ideas were exchanged. So there's my plug for in person again. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions of Sharon? Linda, do you have anything to report?
No, I don't think so. I haven't done anything since I saw you last week. It would only be the report of the committees that I'm on, right? And there's nothing new.
Okay. I just have one thing to report, or it's actually a request for the indulgence of council to permit me to write a letter to the Ontario government with regard to property issues between residents of Mono and the Ontario government, namely persons who live on the periphery of our parks and reserve lands. There are, and this may be known to a few of you, boundary disputes, arguments about accuracy of survey work, and some considerable degree of stress applied to our residents by parks. It isn't continuous. It flares up every once in a while, then goes away for a few years. But my intent would be to suggest that instead of dealing with these issues in a confrontational fashion, that a disputes resolution process be applied, that the parks consider such things as easement agreements, stand pat easement agreements, and other avenues for resolving these matters. I know of one property where this is alive. I suspect there are other ones, and as I say, they result from imperfect survey work over the last 100 years, frankly. And there are no situations that I'm aware of where these things are life and death in terms of park property. So I'd like to have a crack at writing a letter for submission to the government suggesting alternative resolution approaches on these issues. Fred?
I would certainly support you with that. I have visited one of these landowners, and it's just a mess, the problem. The only other comment I would add, Your Worship, and I think I'm correct in saying this isn't from our local Ontario Parks people up at Earl. This is from head office. I think it's coming from. That's where the problem starts.
Well, it's. I think you're right. I think it's head office and lawyers with too little to do, who are trying to make work. It really boils down to that. So I'd like to have a run at that and see what they say, at the risk of stoking the fires for people. And I think the property owners that I'm aware of would be supportive of us weighing in on their behalf. I should also indicate that there are potentially issues between the town of Mono and the Ontario government, specifically Parks Ontario, in terms of road allowance encroachments on Crown lands. So this has the potential, if not dealt with in an amicable fashion, of getting quite messy. Any further thoughts? Okay, next item on the agenda is notices of motion. Does anyone have any notice of motion? I will be bringing a notice of motion at the next meeting with regard to an issue involving the Niagara Escarpment Commission and the new owners of the Schitt's Creek Motel on the Hockley Road. They have approached me, as well as the Dufferin County representative on the NEC, over an issue that the NEC is putting them through, contending, I think incorrectly, that the use of that property as a motel, as a place where people were housed, has been interrupted, and therefore the new owners, in order for them to proceed with anything whatsoever, have to go through a whole hearing process to basically restore the property to its former use as a motel. I should point out that it ceased being a motel, but became a place where athletes were housed for a period of time, essentially like a motel. And our representative on the NEC has never encountered a situation where, as a precondition of submitting a development permit, somebody is forced to prove a use in this fashion. So it's messy. I think the new owners have a vision for the property. I'm not totally clear on how detailed it is, but I think they should be given an opportunity to proceed to development permit applications that are free and clear of, basically being asked to establish something that is already a given. The property is assessed for purposes of a motel. It's paid commercial taxes, and any interruption of use, if at all, has been minor in nature. And yet they're being put through this ringer. And it is troubling in the extreme. So I will have a fulsome notice of motion that will explain the background. And they are being asked to attend a commission meeting in January to prove that the place is indeed a motel. It's the most recognizable motel in maybe the world right now.
Okay,
Sorry, I
finished?
didn't intend to leave everybody speechless there. I've just lost my screen.
It's lunchtime.
Indeed it is. It's actually time for the confirming bylaw followed by adjournment. Is there any other business of council? Okay, I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Mono in session 24, 2021, held on the 16th of November, 2021, that it be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Magdalow. Any opposed? And that motion is carried, followed by a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a mover to that? Councillor Davey, and seconded by Councillor Martin. And the meeting is adjourned at 12:43. Thank you, everyone, for your indulgence. And we'll see everyone next week.